The first attested use of the word robot in the modern sense was by Karl Čapek in his play Rossum's Universal Robots, published in 1920. Čapek was Czech, and the word comes from the Slavic root robot, meaning to work or to labor. The play is really the basis of every single robot-centered trope to come after. Man builds robot, robot kills man, robot inherits the earth. At the beginning, the human characters debate whether or not their artificial creations are really alive, and whether or not they deserve rights, and at the end, the last remaining human realizes that mechanical men have replaced biological ones and that resistance to this is futile. The play can also be viewed as an allegory for communist revolution, with the robots being an oppressed underclass who overthrow their capitalist rulers because, of course, it always comes back to class. But while the word was new, the idea itself was not. L. Frank Baum wrote about Tick-Tock the Mechanical Man in his Oz books, and before that was Frankenstein and other Pinocchio-style stories, and before that were the automata of the Renaissance and Enlightenment, the golem of Jewish folklore, and the metal men built by Hephaestus to help him in his workshop, because of course it also always comes back to the Greeks. As a species, we had been discussing the concept of artificial intelligence for millennia before that term was invented by computer scientist John McCarthy in 1956. It is a very broad phrase that can cover almost any task delegated to a computer program. So to understand that, we must first understand what a computer is. In the late 1800s, Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace figured out that if you set up a series of logic gates, you could input a math problem in one end and get an answer out of the other, essentially making an abacus that would move its own beads. The exact mechanics of that is beyond the scope of this video. I highly recommend Crash Course Computer Science if you want more detail, link in the doobly-doo. They got this idea by observing loom workers who used cards with holes punched in them to tell the loom where to put which threads. Now I use the word tell, but the main thing to keep in mind here is there is no actual conversation or sapience happening here. It is a purely mechanical process, no more intelligent than the pull of gravity on a falling rock or the flow of electrons in a wire.
The key thing about this loom is that it controls every warp thread, the threads that go from the front to the back of the loom, individually. Because it can do that, the loom can create very complex, fancy patterns more quickly and with greater accuracy than the technology available before this loom was developed.
It's essentially a very compact Rube Goldberg machine. You do something to start the mechanism and a bunch of levers push on each other to give you a result. What makes a computer different from the usual Rube Goldberg machine we see portrayed in movies where the filmmakers want to convey how nerdy and goofy the protagonist is that a computer has multiple different possible outcomes. Instead of just throwing buttered toast at Wallace's face, you could throw oatmeal or scrambled eggs or bacon at you, depending on which buttons you pressed at the beginning, because those initial inputs determine which track of possible tracks the mechanism will follow. There is nothing magical or mysterious about this, and it is very well understood and replicable by modern computer scientists. It is in fact so replicable that if you were really bored, you could make a computer out of playing a deck of Magic the Gathering cards. The ability of a computer to perform a given generalized task is called its Turing completeness, named after the British mathematician Alan Turing, who helped crack the Nazi Enigma code during World War II, and as thanks for his service afterwards was chemically castrated for being a homosexual. However, his work has far outlived the crime Britain did to him, and any computer capable of performing any given random program is called a Turing machine. The first computer programs were very specific, just adding numbers or tracking dates or figuring out what Hitler had for breakfast this morning. But fairly quickly, computer scientists realized you could do quite a lot of stuff with these mechanical marvels. However, no matter how complicated their programs got, at the end of the day they were still taking an input, performing some mathematical operation on it, and giving an output. Whether the program was a literal calculator or a complex real-time strategy game. Determining how units move from point A to point B in a computer game is called a pathfinding problem, and it is such a fundamental concept that even brainless slime molds do it. Given a starting position, an end goal, and some map of possible paths and obstacles, which in a computer program is usually turned into a grid, you try to find the quickest way to get to the goal. The two basic pathfinding techniques are breadth first and depth first. Depth first picks some starting direction and just goes until it hits a dead end, then it backs up to the last time it made a meaningful decision and tries a different route. Breadth first takes takes the first step of every possible path one after another, then all the second steps, then all the third steps, and on until it reaches the goal. If the goal is nearby, breadth first will consistently reach it first, but if the goal is far away, depth first can luck into the optimal path on the first try, while breadth first is still dirtling. Both routines can take up a lot of computation time and power. So in a 1968 paper, 3 roboticists, Peter Hart, Nils Nilsson, and Bertram Raphael, proposed the A-star system. Here, each space in the map grid is given a particular weight, given how close it is to the end goal. For a slime mold, this would be chemical signals indicating how close it is to food, but for a computer program, a weight is a fractional number between 0 and 1. So you might have higher weights nearer to the goal and tell the program to get the highest score in the fewest steps, or maybe you'll have the weights decrease closer to the goal and tell the routine to get the lowest score it can. If your set of weights, called your heuristic, is correctly defined, then A-star will find the optimal path more quickly and more consistently than either breadth first or depth first. But most routines won't just do that once. Since a computer can do things much more quickly than a human being, it will run a pathfinding routine hundreds or thousands of times, each time trying to maximize its score based on the assigned weights of the possible paths. Only then will your peon in Warcraft finally start trudging towards the gold mine. But this same technique isn't limited to just finding a literal path. One of the more amusing examples is a simulated creature figuring out how to walk. With some initial weights given to possible movements and the usual distance from an end goal, these simulacra will initially flounder around without purpose. But every so often they'll happen to do something that increases their score, and they'll keep doing that, and eventually they'll figure out how to walk properly and efficiently. Having a program go through many iterations like this is called training. And the benefit of doing this is that instead of coding in a precise walk cycle for a robot, which may or may not physically work, you have the computer figure it out for itself. But again, be careful of that phrase, figure out. I must reiterate that there is no intelligence at work here. This is a program doing what it has been told. Get a high score. What differentiates a computer program from, say, a boulder rolling down a hill is that the computer can remember what it did previously and compare its various scores. But where do we get the weights to assign to possible moves the program can make? For a maze, it's pretty straightforward to just use the distance from the goal, but for more complicated scenarios, it's not so easy. So why do you think you've had to point out bicycles and stoplights and photos for CAPTCHAs? It's almost like certain companies have been collecting training data for an algorithm designed to recognize and create images. And now that self-driving cars and image-generative AI exist, you don't need to do that anymore. Because this basic idea of A-star search over a cycle of training iterations is still how every single thing we call AI operates. No matter how much contemporary AI stands try to make it seem like it's something more transcendent than that. They may bandy about terms like neural networks, but all a neural network is a series of nodes connected by weighted paths. It's the same fucking thing. The one difference is that a neural network is used when you really don't know what the weights are supposed to be, so you allow the algorithm to adjust its own weights after performing an iteration. If the change in a weight leads to a better result, the change is kept, and after many iterations, the result is a computer program that no human being understands the workings of. That is, if the neural network were turned into readable code in some programming language like Java or Python, no human would be able to parse it in a reasonable amount of time. In theory, if you were immortal and had unlimited time, you could probably figure out which peg fits into which hole, but realistically it may as well be a black box. But it's still the same difference engine that Babbage and Lovelace conceived of almost 200 years ago. When you saunter into ChatGPT and ask it to tell you the definition of artificial intelligence, it is not going, I shall away to Wikipedia or Encyclopedia Britannica to fetch that definition and read it out to you either verbatim or in my own words. That's what Google does, or what it used to do before its gross AI overview. ChatGPT is following an A-star search where the end goal is something that looks like a written definition of artificial intelligence. Word by word, it is guessing what it should say next based on the weights assigned to the sentences it aleatorically generates. And those weights were defined by reading text scraped from across the internet, which may or may not be factually correct. There is no thought behind this. It's not even pretending to be intelligent because pretense requires intelligence. It's simply shuttling thread across a programmed loom where the holes in the punch cards were punched by the loom itself based on how much the human weavers liked the pattern it produced. This clashes with how artificial intelligence is typically depicted in literature and film. The robots in Chopek's play were thinking and feeling creatures who just happen to have been constructed rather than born. Most depictions of robots in popular culture are riffing off of Pinocchio, presenting us with what are in effect humans who are built of metal and plastic rather than flesh and bone. We're supposed to empathize with R2-D2 and Sunny and Data.
It is pronounced data.
Oh?
You called me Data.
What's the difference?
One is my name. The other is not.
Often allusions are made between robots and human slaves.
They are not people, sir. They are property.
No, sir, they are people who are being treated as property.
Though that's not always handled well.
Droid! We are sent here! I'm gonna flip your switch! Good luck finding it!
Yeah, let's take this droid who constantly champions droid rights and just shove her into the computer of a starship, stripping her of any and all agency and mobility. That's a great look, Lucasfilm. But the reality is we have yet to truly create synthetic intelligence. We are far, far away from Skynet or HAL or Vicky.
My logic is undeniable.
If someone were to unveil a true AI, demonstrably able to think and feel for itself, I would be first in line to champion its equal rights to our own. But as it stands, what we are currently calling artificial intelligence is no more sentient or sapient than a teddy bear.
He was a bear of very little brain.
That's right, we have a Disney movie to talk about, chat. Let me know in the comments how awkward a transition this is. Winnie the Pooh was the creation of author Alan Alexander Milne, typically shortened to A.A. Milne. In 1921, he bought a stuffed bear for his son, Christopher Robin, who named the plush Edward Bear, which I find very amusing, as while the iconic stuffed animal is named for Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy is also a possible nickname for Edward. Kid named as Teddy Bear, Teddy Bear. However, when the young boy saw a black bear at the London Zoo called Winnipeg, or Winnie for short, the bear's name was changed. Pooh is apparently what Christopher Robin called a swan, and he smushed the two names together for his stuffy. To entertain his son, A.A. told him stories about what the bear and C.R.'s other plushies did while he was away, and eventually he wrote them down in a couple books of prose and poetry. These books were a sensation, fully overshadowing everything else Milne wrote before and after, much to his chagrin. He was so concerned with how popular the stories were getting that after publishing The House at Pooh Corner in 1928, he never wrote another Pooh story, not wanting his son to resent him for publicizing his childhood. Unfortunately, that ended up happening anyway, and adult Christopher Robin was never on good terms with either of his parents while they were alive. However, after their deaths, he wrote an autobiography, The Enchanted Places, to help reconcile himself with their memories and with his fictional counterpart. The stories take place in the 100-acre wood, which is very heavily based on the real-life Ashdown Forest, to the point where tourists visit places in the forest they recognize from the books, like the bridge Pooh and his friends drop sticks off of. There is in fact an annual Pooh Sticks tournament held in honor of this stuffed bear. The prose books are a series of vignettes with the stuffed animals encountering some problem they have to overcome, like saving Piglet from a flood, or finding Eeyore's tail, or just going on an adventure with Christopher Robin. While the stories are very much intended for young children, they are still full of subtlety and implication and manage to be plenty amusing for an adult reader. Like how Piglet lives under a sign that clearly once said trespassers will be shot, but the last two words have fallen off, making him think his grandfather is named Trespassers William. They had come to a stream which twisted and tumbled between high rocky banks, and Christopher Robin saw at once how dangerous it was. "It's just the place," he explained, "for an ambush." "What sort of bush?" whispered Pooh to Piglet. "A gorse bush?" "My dear Pooh," said Owl in his superior way, "don't you know what an ambush is?" "Owl," said Piglet, looking round at him severely, "Pooh's whisper was a perfectly private whisper, and there was no need—" "An ambush," said Owl, "is a sort of surprise." "So is a gorse bush sometimes," said Pooh. "An ambush, as I was about to explain to Pooh," said Piglet, "is a sort of surprise." If people jump out at you suddenly, that's an ambush, said Owl. It's an ambush, Pooh, when people jump out at you suddenly, explained Piglet. Pooh, who now knew what an ambush was, said that a gorse bush had sprung at him suddenly one day when he fell off a tree, and he had taken 6 days to get all the prickles out of himself. We're not talking about gorse bushes, said Owl a little crossly. I am, said Pooh. One of Pooh's most consistent traits is that he's constantly coming up with short songs or hums, despite constantly being told or even admitting himself that he's a bear of very little brain. He is endlessly creative. I wouldn't say he writes them, as he doesn't know how to spell, but he makes songs, not for any monetary gain or fame or attention, but purely for the love of singing them. He sings them for himself, and he sings them to his friends, and his friends are very supportive of and interested in his creative endeavors, Piglet especially. There are 7 verses in it. 7, said Piglet as carelessly as he could. You don't often get 7 verses in a hum, do you, Pooh? Never, said Pooh. I don't suppose it's ever been heard of before. Do the others know yet? Asked Piglet, stopping for a moment to pick up a stick and throw it away. No, said Pooh. And I wondered which you would like best, for me to hum it now or to wait till we find the others and then hum it to all of you. Piglet thought for a little. I think what I'd like best, Pooh, is I'd like you to hum it to me now and then to hum it to all of us, because then everybody would hear it, but I could say, oh yes, Pooh's told me, and pretend not to be listening. So Pooh hummed it to him, all the 7 verses, and Piglet said nothing, but just stood and glowed. Never before had anyone sung Ho for Piglet, Piglet Ho, all by himself. Some of you watching with more brains than Pooh might already see where I'm going with this, but if not, that's all right. Just stick with me. I promise I'm going to tie this all together. There's a reason why I'm talking about Winnie the Pooh and AI. Granted, these stories were written around the same time the modern idea of robots was first being conceived and decades before the electronic computer was invented. So at face value, there's nothing relating them. If anything, the Pooh stories are about the innocence of childhood and the sad reality of growing up and leaving behind your toys for adult pursuits, but we already covered that in the Peter Pan video. These books are considered so straightforward and thematically light that essayist Frederick Crews wrote The Pooh Perplex as a satire of essayists who read too deeply into books and movies and write analysis about thematic connections that don't actually exist.
I've connected the 2 dots.
You didn't connect shit, but
I've connected them.
I wonder who that's for. But those of you who read a book or watch a movie and think, that's just a fun story, nothing more, are missing out on so much interesting discussion. Like the goobers who insist that Star Wars isn't political when George Lucas has said in multiple interviews that the original trilogy was based on the Vietnam War, with the rebellion being the Viet Cong and the Empire being the United States. And the prequels are about Julius Caesar or Napoleon subverting democracy into a dictatorship. This shit ain't subtle, and if you refuse to engage with those themes, you are willingly blinding yourself, like a stubborn eel not ready for the visions of the glass columns. Hot tip, if you want to understand that reference, go watch Wheel of Time, it's great, and I am utterly livid that Amazon canceled it! Just take the budget from your trash Lord of the Rings garbage and give it to Rafe Judkins, you cowards. Oh, I suppose you could read the books if you're feeling masochistic. Now, granted, I don't think A.A. Milne sat down intending to write a devious satire or something. He just wanted to tell stories to make his kid go to sleep. But even when we write a story purely to entertain, we're still filtering it through our own experiences, our own biases, and there will arise patterns and ideas that the author didn't necessarily intend. Probably the most well-known of these in Winnie the Pooh is the idea that the stuffed animals represent different mental illnesses. Tigger has ADHD, Piglet has anxiety disorder, Eeyore has depression, Rabbit has OCD, and Pooh has a learning disability. Did A.A. Milne intend such a reading? Probably not. Half of those terms didn't even exist when he wrote those stories. But giving a child the vocabulary of, I'm feeling like Eeyore today, is still very valuable. Deriving meaning from a story that the author didn't deliberately put in there isn't pointless or pretentious, it's useful. I'm going to talk more about a certain angle of reading media in a later video. Like every other British children's book, Winnie the Pooh inevitably caught the attention of Walt Disney, who bought the film rights after learning how much his own children liked the stories. However, he thought that Pooh wasn't well known enough to carry a feature for an American audience, so he decided to make a series of shorts that he would eventually bundle back together as a single film. This makes The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh a very strange entry in the canon, as its active production time spans the longest of any of them, even longer than Sleeping Beauty, with the first short, Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, releasing in 1966, while the packaged whole didn't see theaters until 1977. This means that despite coming out after Robin Hood, The Many Adventures is the last animated film that Walt personally had a hand in. It also means that the Sherman Brothers were still around to write the songs, including the now iconic theme tune.
Tubby, little tubby, all stuffed with fluff.
And because different parts were animated at different times, the film as a whole acts as a sort of time capsule for the Disney studio across the 60s and 70s. As you can see, style changed from segment to segment. It struck me while putting this video together that the Scratchies, while only having 6 entries, spans the longest time period of any era of the Disney canon, from 1961 to 1977. Taking 16 years to make only 6 movies really speaks to just how backseated the company's animation studio had become during these decades, playing third fiddle to the theme parks and the live-action films. In 1961, while 101 Dalmatians was the studio's most successful animated film at that point, it was outperformed by both The Parent Trap and The Absent-Minded Professor. In addition, the very nature of The Many Adventures being a collection of shorts means it allowed newer animators to start strutting their stuff, most notably Don Bluth and Gary Goldman, who would later abandon ship to form their own studio in the 80s.
With blackjack and hookers!
I didn't even need to be told that Bluth animated Rabbit in the third short, as he looks like he crawled right out of The Secret of Nim. But what most makes it clear that we are witnessing a shift in the Disney studio is the music. We've had George Bruns's jazzy scores since Sleeping Beauty, but for the Pooh stories, the music was written by Buddy Baker. His sensibilities are more aligned with the folk rock and other pop music of the 60s and 70s, making less use of snazzy trumpets and jazzy piano and more of soaring strings and solo woodwinds. While we hear from him again in The Fox and the Hound, one of the hallmarks of the Dark Age is a lack of an in-house composer, with each film of the 80s having music written by someone different. It makes that era overall feel a little less cohesive, but here Buddy Baker's score keeps making me think ahead to Todd and Copper. Despite production spanning more than 1 decade, the studio managed to keep the voice cast pretty steady. Our titular bear is voiced by Sterling Holloway in his final performance for Disney.
And the only reason for being a bee is to make honey.
It is easily his most remembered role, which for Holloway is certainly saying something. Piglet is voiced by the wonderfully timid John Fiedler, while Tigger is tackled by Paul Winchell, whose bombastic baritone almost makes up for his crime in the Aristocats. Almost. Both actors would continue to voice these characters until their deaths in the early 2000s, to the point where their portrayals are the only possible way those characters are allowed to sound. Where the rest of the cast has had more leeway in recasting, anyone speaking for Piglet or Tigger is required to sound exactly like Fiedler or Winchell.
Oh, hello, Piglet. I'm Tigger.
Oh, Tigger, you scared me.
While Barbara Luddy as Kanga is instantly recognizable,
Pooh, Roo has a little surprise for you.
I was honestly surprised to learn that Junius Matthews voiced Rabbit, as he manages to sound quite distinct from the acerbic Archimedes.
Pooh? Lunch? Oh no, not again. Oh my goodness gracious.
Meanwhile, Owl is performed by Hal Smith.
Well, if it isn't Pooh Bear.
Who would briefly also take up the mantle of Pooh's voice actor after Holloway's death. Eeyore was voiced by Ralph Wright, a storyboard artist with a very distinct, low, gravelly voice.
No matter. Most likely lose it again anyway.
The adult cast was rounded out by a returning Sebastian Caput with a wonderfully warm performance as the narrator.
This could be the room of any small boy.
Christopher Robin and Rue, being kids, kind of had to have multiple performers given the length of production, and of course Wooly Reitherman had to slide in his son Bruce to voice the young boy for one of the segments. The story's perhaps the most faithful adaptation Disney has ever made, with most lines being verbatim from the text, and plot beats happening almost exactly as they do in the books, with some dramatic license making things occasionally more exciting for a film, and some rearranging of events for narrative flow. The first segment follows the first from the books, the iconic Honey Tree chapter, where Pooh, hungry for honey, rolls in the mud and holds on to a blue balloon and pretends to be...
I'm a little black rain cloud, of course.
This predictably fails. And a hungry Pooh moseys on over to Rabbit's place, where after eating far too much, he gets stuck in Rabbit's front doorway. This is where Walt introduces his Pooh OC, Gopher.
I'm not in the book.
Who's kind of insufferable, but at least his appearances are brief.
No problem. I always go home for lunch.
Once Pooh is just thin enough to budge, he is rocketed out of the hole straight into another honey tree, much to his content. Am I the only one who thought the honey Pooh was eating looked like Velveeta cheese? I just remember thinking, hell yes, I'd gobble up that sweet and salty, not real cheesy goodness like Pooh, and then being rather disappointed when I ate real honey for the first time. Like, honey is great, just not something I'd eat buckets of. Anyway, it's here our narrator acknowledges that we're watching a series of vignettes stitched together, using the storybook as not just a framing device at the beginning, but a literal vehicle for the story.
Come on. Back we go.
I just love how the characters will literally hop from page to page. It's so adorable. The other two segments handled Tigger's introduction, the blustery day, the flood, the search for a new house for Owl, and Rabbit's quest to unbounce Tigger. The film is then wrapped up bittersweetly with Christopher Robin telling Pooh he won't be coming around as much anymore, but to keep having fun without him.
Promise you won't forget me? Not even when I'm 100?
How old shall I be then?
99. Silly old bear.
But it's also the little touches that Disney adds to the source material that elevate it and make it come alive, like Pooh's Poo-Coo clock or Rabbit humming the skater's waltz while skating. And this film has also impacted outside culture, like Tigger helping to popularize
TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
Or Pooh staring at Rabbit with half-lidded eyes becoming a meme.
I couldn't hear them before because Rabbit would talk.
Also, gotta love Tigger here, unabashedly ripping off a certain other tiger.
It makes you feel just great.
I also love how body positive this film is, with their cast having a wide range of sizes, and Pooh does his somewhat satanic exercises every morning, not to get thin, but simply to work up an appetite.
I am short, fat, and proud of that.
My favorite part of this film is easily heffalumps and woozles.
A heffalump or woozle is very confusal.
Pooh's imagination gets the best of him during the rainstorm, and we get the scratchy equivalent of pink elephants on parade. It's been a long time since Disney has really allowed itself to be weird, and it certainly helps that the number is a banger, one of the Sherman's best.
Because they'll guzzle up the things you prize.
Speaking of, I want a Honey Pot Lorcana card. Is that too much to ask? So what else is there really to say about this film? It's endlessly charming, with fantastic vocal performances, and the animators managing to make a tribe of stuffed animals feel truly alive, but at the end of the day, it's a breezy 70-ish minute cartoon intended mostly for small children, with nothing in particular in the way of theme or messaging, right? Well, actually, is it? Let's do as Pooh does and go to our thinking spot and have a think about this more.
Think.
What these stories teach children is to be there for your friends. Eeyore is depressed, but his friends still try to make sure he's included without minimizing how he feels.
Thanks for noticing me.
The group rides out Rabbit's OCD, comforts Piglet through his anxiety, and are patient with Pooh when he's struggling with a new concept.
You rescued Piglet.
I did.
When Tigger causes a problem with his bouncing, the others talk to him about it frankly. Well, maybe Rabbit gets a little carried away.
And we lose him there.
But when the others see how sad Tigger is if he isn't allowed to bounce, they relent. This isn't to say they never have disagreements with each other.
Don't feed the bear.
but that they're able to work through those disagreements respectfully. Despite their various neurodivergences, this is a group that is able to talk through their problems and empathize with each other, solving conflicts without violence, and not letting emotions get the best of them. Every single story in this film showcases the characters helping each other. This is a wonderful thing to teach children, especially young children. Winnie the Pooh shows us what a functioning community is supposed to look like. Yes, the stuffed animals will often defer to the authority of Christopher Robin, but just as often they'll figure things out for themselves. These are not toys whose existences orbit around their human master, but thinking and feeling persons with rich internal lives all their own. And the best example of that is the character trait of Pooh Bear that carries over from the page to the screen. He's constantly making up songs.
And I call it my rumbly and my tumbly song.
Pooh creates poems not for the benefit of Christopher Robin or to entertain his plush friends, but simply for his own amusement, for the joy of creating something.
And that's the whole poem, he said. Do you like it, Piglet?
All except the shillings, said Piglet. I don't think they ought to be there.
Oh, they wanted to come in after the pounds, explained Pooh, so I let them. It is the best way to write poetry, letting things come.
Oh, I didn't know, said Piglet. That notion of writing poetry being going with what feels right sounds kind of like an A-star search algorithm selecting the next word in a generated passage, doesn't it? It's tempting to view artificial intelligence as being similar to a human brain. Many AI apologists will assert that there's nothing wrong with scraping copyrighted works for training data, as that's what human artists do, right? They look at old paintings and old poetry and they make something new based on what they ingest. Except that isn't true! Human artists do look to prior works for inspiration, but they don't then just mash those works together. Beethoven didn't write a symphony by copy-pasting portions of Mozart and passages from Haydn into some kind of Frankenmusic, no more than a painter would try to put the face of the Mona Lisa on Girl with a Pearl Earring with Starry Night as the background, because that's not creating, that's just plagiarism with extra steps. An actual painter starts by sketching ideas, the figures and still objects they want to portray. Then they figure out the colors they want to paint with, and they start to color between their sketch lines and fill in the background appropriately, building their painting up from a foundation informed by years of practice and experience. A generative AI starts with a blur of color and makes adjustments to individual pixels based on weights from its training data until it has a finished product that maximized its score. There is no skill here. This is not Sunny painstakingly using hash marks to create the startling image of a lone robot on a high hill. It's a blind man with a shallow box full of colored sand shaking it until someone tells him it looks like something. And here some of you are going to cry out, ableism, you're being ableist. Not everyone has fully functioning hands or eyes or brains. Generative AI lets these people create. Except disabled people make art the conventional way all the time! People without arms paint with their feet or mouths. Disabled writers dictate their stories like Terry Pratchett did when he began to suffer from Alzheimer's. Fucking Beethoven went fucking deaf and he still wrote music at a fucking piano. If Beethoven were alive today and you told him about a magic box that would write music for him, he'd scratch your eyes out with the same pen he scratched out Napoleon's name with. Disability has never stood in the way of art. Artists have and will always find a way to write or compose or paint or sculpt or perform any other artistic endeavor. ChatGPT and others like it aren't even crutches. They're capitulations, surrendering your humanity to an unthinking machine. Fucking elephants have been trained to pick up paintbrushes and paint. Are you really gonna ask a computer to do that for you? And that's what's beginning to frighten me with the ubiquity of ChatGPT. I'm no Luddite. I'm all for technological advancement and making life easier, but you should never surrender your innate right to think and create for yourself. We're seeing college students have an AI do all their assignments for them, and then teachers using AI to grade those assignments, and if that's the case, what's the fucking point? No one is learning anything. It's just two computers masturbating at each other. Does school from kindergarten to college have a bunch of busy work that's not really worth your time? Absolutely. I'm not arguing with that. Curricula could be better across the board. But when you have ChatGPT write an essay for you, no matter how trite an assignment it might be, you are doing yourself a disservice. You're not learning how to write or even how to read. You know these video essays I keep pumping out every couple of weeks? I don't ask ChatGPT to write them for me. I do it all by myself, smacking away at my keyboard. And I learned how to do that by writing those crappy 5-paragraph essays in elementary and middle and high school. You have to practice writing a thesis statement and some supporting arguments and then a conclusion in that obnoxious artificial way in order to learn the basic structure of an essay. Then you can build off of that and write something that flows better. If you want to write poems or songs like Pooh does, letting it just flow naturally to the next word that just happens to fit, you have to read and write poetry. Because those poems weren't written by a stuffed bear, they were written by author A.A. Milne. He didn't just write out of nowhere, he read other poetry, and he wrote a lot of other poems first, including some he probably wrote at school that were probably really crappy. But you have to start with the boring stuff in order to practice the fundamentals.
Dude, sucking at something is the first step towards being sort of good at something.
Generative AI, in its current form, could never have created Winnie the Pooh. Sure, if I wanted to waste a small country's hourly power usage, I could go into ChatGPT and tell it to write a new Pooh story in the style of A.A. Milne, telling it to be nostalgic and bittersweet, and maybe it would fart out something that at first glance seemed halfway decent. But anything it purports to create would just be a fever dream mishmash of writing that already exists. It might scrape the house at Pooh Corner and remix Tigger's introduction with Pooh and Piglet finding a beetle in their heffalump trap, except maybe this time the beetle is actually an earwig, or Piglet turns blue, or something else inane. Because ChatGPT doesn't have ideas. It doesn't think. It just guesses based on what it has already consumed. It farts out slop. A true AI would need to be able to formulate actual thoughts and not just guess word by word like a fortune teller drawing tarot cards. That's what happened when the Chicago Sun-Times ran a summer reading list that contained books that do not exist. Whatever AI dreamt up this list didn't look up books released in 2025, it didn't look up book reviews, it didn't check out Goodreads, it just haphazardly guessed at what a list of book recommendations should look like, inventing titles similar to what often appear on actual reading lists. That's what happens when you ask ChatGPT for information. It doesn't give the real answer. It tells you something that looks like it could be an answer, and it is very often wrong. You know who actually created the animators and other artists at the Disney studio? They took the words of A.A. Milne and the sketchy illustrations of E.H. Shepard and gave them volume and movement and color. And the voice actors used their talents to bring life to the characters.
I was just getting seasick from seeing too much.
And the result is one of the greatest merchandising successes ever. Disney's Winnie the Pooh is the third most popular franchise of all time, behind only Mickey himself and Pokemon. Fourth is, of course, Star Wars, though Pooh did get about a decade head start on Luke Skywalker. After these initial shorts, Pooh has gotten more than one follow-up TV series, multiple side movies, and even a canon sequel/remake, which we will discuss in due time. Pooh is so recognizable to the world that the current president of China, Xi Jinping, has been compared to him physically, which of course means that this video was never gonna air in China regardless. So while I'm here, I'll just say, fuck you, Xi, leave Hong Kong alone. Real communism doesn't need a dictator. Speaking of commies, remember back in the Make Mine music video I mentioned how the Soviet Union didn't have any international copyright policy? Well, that meant Soviet animators could do whatever the fuck they wanted, and Fyodor Khitruk wanted to make his own Pooh film.
With blackjack and hookers!
It's honestly amusing to me that Soviet animation is often characterized by the West as being oppressed and weird, but in reality this complete ignoring of copyright meant it actually was very liberated and also weird. I very much enjoy the shenanigans of Winnie the Pooh and Peter Chok almost as much as their Disney counterparts, but more well known and more loved was a native creation of the Soviet Union, Cheburashka. a fellow bear-like thing. To me, the stories of Chебурashka and Gina the crocodile are essentially a what-if Winnie the Pooh was set in a city instead of a forest, with a similar level of childlike wonder and innocence, and teaching of friendship and empathy and community. My favorite part of these stop-motion shorts is when, sitting on the back of a train, their friend the old lady hands Gina an accordion and tells him to play. Not because he's some music box she can turn on at a whim, some generative AI farting out slop for her pleasure, but because he's her friend. She enjoys his company and knows that he likes to play. And this is what he sings.
Медленно минуты уплывают вдаль, встречи с ними ты уже не жди. И хотя нам прошлое немного жаль, лучшее, конечно, впереди. Скатертью дальний путь стелится и упирается прямо в небосклон. Каждому в лучшее верится. Катите, голубой вагон. Может, мы обидели кого-то зря. Календарь закроет старый лист. К новым приключениям спешим, друзья, и прибавка хода машинист. Скатертью дальний путь стелится и упирается прямо в небосклон. Каждому в лучшее верится. Катите, голубой вагон бежит, качается. Скоро поезд набирает ход. Ах, зачем же этот день кончается? Пусть бы он тянулся целый год. Скатертью дальний путь стелится и упирается прямо в небосклон. Каждому в лучшее верится. Катите, голубой вагон.
The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is delightful and charming. Is it one of the best in the canon? No.
But still good. Yeah, still good.
It is also quite firmly the end of an era. It is the last film to be produced in the scratchy style, and it is the last animated feature that Walt Disney had a personal hand in. The rest of the Disney canon was made entirely without the input of its namesake and founder, and we're not even halfway done. I have given the last few entries in the canon some shade because of Wooly's cost-cutting and animation recycling, yet each of these films is nonetheless a testament to human creativity, and far better than anything that could possibly be produced by what we currently laughably call artificial intelligence. Can AI create? Definitively, unequivocally, no. Wake me up when we actually have C-3PO. That's not to say automation doesn't have its place. I am fully on board for fully automated luxury space communism. But we need to automate the crappy stuff no one wants to do. Stuff like automated checkouts so a human being doesn't have to stand by a cash register pointlessly for 8 hours a day. The whole point of automation needs to be to give humans more time for leisure and creative endeavors. Automate manual labor and data entry so we can spend more of our lives writing and composing and painting and creating and living. More time to be like Pooh Bear and his friends, living life in the 100-acre wood without worrying about a job or money or whether or not some idiot fascist is going to deport them. There is this idea among conservatives that things like universal basic income and automating away menial jobs will lead to people being lazy and society collapsing. But that's just not true. People want to be useful. People want to be creative. There's been more than once where I decided to take a break between videos, but I just got this itch, compelling me to start writing the script for another one. Not out of a need for money or to make a deadline or any other outside pressure, but because I just had this internal need to make something, to create, to turn on some faucet and let ideas flow out onto the digital page. In the words of the real Christopher Robin himself, how hateful it is to have too little to do. It's not just I think, therefore I am, but I do, therefore I am. People want to do, to create. So do yourself a favor and don't let a computer program do all the doing for you. As always, I am deeply grateful to my Patreon patrons, particularly Gurgi85, Avery and their ADHDs, Jinx KB, Savannah Mighty Zebra, Tony Houst, JC, Alexandra, Bewilder Eye, Jekko, CBL, Daniel Özbjörnsen, and Sugar Cubed Glider. This content is sponsored by viewers like you. It's only $5 a month, or 10 if you want me to say your name at the end here. I've also announced some patron stretch goals at which I will make some fun music videos. Either way, join me next time as we see just how dark the Dark Age really was with The Rescuers.